Thank you. You see, I have a clock in front of me that you can't see. And that clock tells me exactly how many minutes I have to speak with you. I am a man who enjoys the sound of my own voice. So when they now told me I was going to be speaking, they made sure to put a clock in front of me because I might just get lost droning on and on, hearing my own voice. So first thing we are going to do this morning, let me first of all explain. Pastor Sam is to blame for anything I do wrong here. All I know how to do is talk, but I'm not a pastor. But he managed to drag a man who does not know how to preach to come and stand behind the pulpit where so many of you expect to hear from God. So when the invitation came that I should come and speak, I realized that before anything, I must first of all enter the proper caveats. I was born a Christian into a Christian home. And if you must know, I attended Kerubu and Seraphu growing up. In Kerubu and Seraphu, we don't have opening and closing time. So it is usually as the Spirit directs. But before I will start this morning, I want to do something. And that is because I think we should pray. But you see, for lazy Christians like me, who really know what to say when we open our mouths, because I don't know how to ask God for food. I don't know how to ask him for clothes, how to ask him for shelter. I believe Jesus Christ was very specific in saying that if the birds of the air, they don't plant, but they feed. The lilies of the field, they clothed in fine raiments, and yet they have no tailors. So I took those things very seriously growing up. I internalized it. So I found that anytime I am expected to pray, I do the Christian thing. I just speak in tongues. So those of you who are very used to praying, you know exactly what to say, how to approach God. Lord, Heavenly Father, magnificent Lord of heaven. You have it all rehearsed. So you know what to say to him. But I don't have it rehearsed. I don't know what to say. So what I tend to do is I open my mouth and I let him feel it. But I know amongst the things I'll be saying it that are going to be incomprehensible will be a part that will be asking God to grant me the grace not to do violence to his word. So please, let us pray together. Mareke tele ya brabo boseke yantale mashayandale braba soki yataka mosainda shentere momo sakalu boseka indale mozainda. In Jesus' mighty name.
Amen.
Okay. Now that we have gotten that out of the way, just know this: I am not a pastor. I have been asked to speak, not to preach. So just pardon me and take me the way I am. Since they have asked me to speak and I'm speaking in a church, I imagine that it is only proper that we started our discourse with a Bible verse. And I shall be taking my reading from Genesis chapter 25, specifically verse 23. Are we there? Okay. We are reading from the New King James Version. Verse 23 of chapter 25 goes, "And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Amen? Now, how does this fit into the Nigerian situation, you might want to ask? What I will do this morning is that I will start by giving you background. There wasn't a country named Nigeria until 1960. there was an English territory, a colonial contraption. That colonial contraption had the protectorate of northern Nigeria, or it's not, yeah, the colony of Lagos, the protectorate of northern Nigeria, and the protectorate of southern Nigeria. And they were brought together, I believe, in 1914 or thereabout. They were brought together for administrative convenience. Now, by around 1951, an attempt was made to start cobbling together a country out of these disparate territories. And there were several constitutional conferences that were being held. Some were held here in Nigeria, in Ibadan, to be exact, in Kaduna. There were conferences in Enugu, and then they went all the way to Lancaster House. I am sensitive to the passage of time, and I will not bore you with what is not important. But what is important that must be understood clearly is that Nigerians went through a series of consultations lasting several years. They experimented with several things, but they eventually came to the point of agreement that the country that was going to come out of this space should be governed based on federalist principles. They also agreed that just like the nominal parent, the Great Britain, they should have a parliamentary democracy. These were the basic building blocks of the country they agreed to build. And that was the country that gained independence in 1960. That country need not have been birthed in 1960. We could have had a situation where, as Ahmadu Bello wished, after the debacle in Lagos in 1951, we could have ended up with Arewa, and then you would have had the Republic of Arewa or Arewanistan, and you might have ended up with either the Republic of Southern Nigeria. It could have been any number of nations coming out of the space called Nigeria, but one was battered. That one that was battered was the product of agreements, of negotiations. People considered things. I recall from my study of history that Ahmadu Bello was persuaded to bring the penal code in place of Sharia law. The father of the terrorist-loving Gumi was the Grand Cadi of northern Nigeria, and he wanted Islamic law of Sharia to reign over the northern part of Nigeria. But Ahmadu Bello was conscious of the fact that if this were to happen, the Christian minority, or let me just say the Christian populace of the north, would have rebelled against the one north concept. So he made concessions, which is what every Democrat or true leaders would do. So he made concessions and he adopted the penal code instead of the Sharia law that was being championed by Sheikh Gumi, then the Grand Cadi of northern Nigeria. Several compromises were made by the different rulers, the different leaders of the regions. And it is out of this compromise that the Nigerian state was born, and it was given independence. Given, that's a very important thing to pay attention to. It was given its independence on the 1st of October, 1960. The country that was born on the 1st of October, 1960, just a little over 61 years ago, wasn't a perfect country. There is no perfection in humanity. It's only God that is perfect. Humanity is a work in progress, and that country that was birthed had several imperfections. But it was a work in progress. A bunch of young men, then young men, if they were alive today, they would be in their 80s and 90s. They grew impatient with the imperfections of that country. and they attempted to correct what they thought was wrong. So they mortally injured the Nigerian state on the 15th day of January 1966. He was injured. He didn't die. But the undertakers showed up in July 1966 and they killed it. Nigeria died in July of 1966. We need to be very clear about this, because if something has come to replace a thing, it would be because that thing that used to exist either ceased to exist or it was cancelled somewhat. But however you might care to describe it, the key thing to understand is that the country that was negotiated all through the 50s and that was given birth to on the 1st of October 1960 was killed in 1966. Now, when you kill anything, you have to bury it. So the obsequies started. And they sent a few more people to die with Nigeria. Probably running into hundreds of thousands. People died of starvation. Some people were killed in the war. There was nothing civil about the Civil War. War is never civil. Words like kwashoko was introduced into our lexicon. See that okoroko that you like eating today? That stockfish that is today a delicacy. It wasn't a delicacy. It was meant to help introduce protein to seriously malnourished children who died during the burial ceremonies for the Nigerian state. Now that that country has died, why are we still in one that is called Nigeria? It is very important that we understand that, I think you have this thing, Fela popularized it, he will say zombie. Zombie, oh zombie, zombie. You know the song, right? But where the word came from, it means that a dead person was revived. The dead person might not have all the capacities of the dead, of the living, but it apes and mimics life. So Nigeria resurfaced as a zombie immediately after the Civil War. And it's apt that soldiers, otherwise known as zombies, were the ones who battered that new Nigeria, and they were the ones who were ruling it. So when that new Nigeria came, that new Nigeria has a unique characteristic, and we must pay attention at this point. Every time you see a shadow on the wall, you know that the shadow is not the person, even though the shadow mimics the movement of its owner. What Nigeria has today pretends to be the Nigeria that was negotiated, but I'll show you clearly how that is not so. The Nigeria that was negotiated and birthed on the 1st of October 1960 was the child of a compromise agreed by all, and the lifeblood of that compromise was federalism. What is federalism? I know this is not usual church language, but we must explain it to ourselves. Federalism, broken down to brass tacks, means that the choir department, the ushering department, let's say the security department, have agreed that, okay, this is our space. However, we will not all do the same thing. So you will do your own thing like you know how to do it. I'll do my own thing like I know how to do it. And then we would all bring it together to create the synergy to make this a service. Right? Imagine you had come to church and it was only the choir singing, or it was only the security or the media, or just the congregants, and there is nobody behind the pulpit. That wouldn't be complete now, would it? That was exactly what the situation was. A compromise was reached. Federalism was to be the basis for the creation of the synergies that had to be created out of our diversities. Now, when the people who remade Nigeria in their own image came around after the death of the first one, you must understand that ideas rule the world. Ideas rule the world. Federalism was an idea, and there were several other things surrounding that idea, and that central idea birthed the Nigeria that died in 1966. But this new Nigeria in which we all live is also an idea. But the question is, what kind of idea is it? It is critical that when you want to treat any ailment, you must first of all understand the nature of the ailment. If you were treating ringworm when the person has leprosy, you would have wasted time. If you were treating malaria when the person is afflicted with typhoid, you would also have wasted your time. So it is critical that we understand the nature of the idea behind the current Nigeria. The idea ruling Nigeria today didn't just emerge in 1999 when they brought Decree 24 that is called the 1999 Constitution. That idea, that tendency had been there before Nigeria was originally birthed in 1960. But that idea was subsumed beneath the collective will of the people who founded Nigeria. That idea is feudalism. Now, what is feudalism, and how did it become a key part of where we are today? I would explain it to you. Feudalism is actually a class system. It endures on the belief that there would always be the rich and there would always be the poor. But in its own case, it works with very strict class stratification. So you have the feudal lords and those who serve the feudal lords, who act on behalf of the feudal lords. And then you have the commoners. That's all there are. Feudal lord, those who service them, and then the commoners. Now, feudalism does not exist in a vacuum in Nigeria. It's a matter of historical. You have to have some historical perspective to this. Nigerian feudalism is a function of theocracy. There were two Islamic empires in northern Nigeria before the white men came here. The first was the Kanem Borno Empire, and the second was the Sokoto Caliphate. The Sokoto Caliphate is essentially a theocracy, because at the head of that caliphate is the head of the Muslim Ummah. So you cannot be the Sultan of Sokoto and not be the head of, quote and unquote, Nigerian Muslims. In spite of the fact that in Yoruba land, for instance, we have had a longer history of Islam than the Sokoto Jihad. The Jihad met Islam in parts of Yoruba land, but the Yoruba Muslim is still part of the Muslim Ummah that is headed by the Sultan of Sokoto. Now you must understand that these ideas of feudalism was always there, as I have said. But by around 1957, some people started planning ahead for when Nigeria would become a single country, but they also understood ahead of time that the system of governance was not sustainable, and there will come a time when the military would have a role to play. These I have referred to, as my brother said earlier on. I do have 2 books. One is available for free download. The second I'll make available on the 20th of October for free download again. dailyfarotimi.com is where you can get it. But in that book, The Imperatives of Nigerian Revolution, I pointed out something, and it is awesome that it should be pointed out here as well. When you have an idea that is found on the impoverishment of the people, which means that the people must be poor. So when you look all around you and you see poverty in Nigeria today, you think it's by accident. It's not by accident. It is by design. Poverty and ignorance are important ingredients in the maintenance of feudal orders. The more you know, the more questions you would ask. And the richer you are, the more time you have on your hand to think. Your capacity to use your brain is a challenge to feudalism. That is why you have weaponized ignorance chasing Nigerians around. The poverty you also see is by design. Because the poorer you are, the less likely that you are going to ask questions of those who rule you. So you have this idea of feudalism that started as part of a culture, but that has transcended that culture. It used to be that when you're talking feudalism, people are waiting to see an emir, or they are waiting to see a sultan or an alkali. But the reality is that that idea, and that is where we come back to the ideas again, that idea is like a virus. It has jumped host. Where it used to exist only within the Fulani culture, it now exists in each and every Nigerian culture. Your governors are not unlike emirs. The president is not unlike the sultan. The government does not exist for all. It exists for a class. Feudalism does not work on the basis of the rule of law. It works on the basis of impunity, which means that somebody somewhere must be able to decide to whom the rules would apply and to whom it wouldn't apply, to whom the laws should apply and who should be above the law. So you find very quickly that it is impossible to build a nation, because nations thrive on citizenship. Citizenship comes only when there is equality and the law is ruling. And it is only when you have citizens that you are likely to ever have patriots. So you have a country, yes, but you don't have citizens. You have ruiners in place of rulers, and there are definitely no leaders. When you speak to leadership, you're talking about vision. It means that the person can close their eyes and see where they are going, even with their eyes closed. The Bible says that the old men shall dream dreams, and then young men shall see visions. What vision is the Nigerian seeing today? The capacity to envision is the God in you. That capacity to see what is not in front of you, that is God inside of you. Your creative capacity is founded on your imagination, and that is where the second nation comes in. You know, I was fortunate to be in a gathering of very old men early last week. I must have been Monday or Tuesday. I was in a gathering of people in there. One of them was about 94 years old. And somebody turned to the man and said, you are a prophet. The man said, no, I'm just saying the truth. And I laughed inside of me because I found something. You know, when we talk about the truth, we sometimes forget what the truth really means. But the truth is actually God. I'll show you. The enduring nature of truth, the proof of the truth, is in its indestructibility. It is in its immortality. So if what you have said at any point in time is the truth. Truth must be distinguished from facts. Facts might evolve and change. The truth, on the other hand, never changes. Now, the Spirit of God, which is the Spirit of truth, which lives in each and every one of his creation, continues to create a schizophrenia inside the Nigerian. Let me show you. They have already told you that this is how far you can go and no more. You are already being told that you should accept second-class citizenship. And I use that word citizenship loosely. You're already being told on so many levels that you should accept the lies that have been told as the truth. But the amazing thing is that regardless of how many times those who will prefer that you embrace the lie might insist on your acceptance of the lie, the truth of God that is inside of you that will not accept the lie continues to rebel against what you are being told. Those are the two nations. There is a nation that is trapped inside each and every one of us here. And that is the one that leaves most of us frustrated. We believe Nigeria can be better than it is. We look around us and we wonder. I think the Igbos have a proverb. They say that when you find a goat dead in a yam barn, you know that that goat did not die of hunger. Let me, I can be quite inelegant in the way I interpret what I don't understand, but I know there is an Igbo proverb. You know, Igbos are the yam growers, and they have their yam barns that they build of bamboo and raffia and everything. And then you now enter the place, it's full of yam, and there is a goat that is dead. It might have died of anything, it is not hunger. That is the Nigerian tragedy. We are dying of famine in the midst of plenty. There is a contradiction there that should worry all of us. And I think it is time we began to ask ourselves some very serious questions instead of continuing to react. If the conflict that is becoming impossible to deny must be resolved, there are things that we ourselves must do. One of the first things we must do is to defiantly speak the truth. It is not always going to be convenient. They might even slap you sometime. I know of people who have been slammed in prisons in Nigeria for speaking nothing but the truth. It will not immunize you from the insanity of the environment in which we live, but it will do one thing for you. It will help you sleep better at night. Like seriously, it will make you sleep much better at night. That is not always a very easy thing to use to comfort somebody who has been deprived or punished simply because of the truth that they have told. But we must also understand that finding the peace of the graveyard and keeping quiet in the face of the manifest insanities that have overtaken our country will change nothing. I found that our fear of dying, more than anything else, steals our tongues. It makes it so difficult for people to speak their truth because they are afraid of the consequences. Oh, I don't want to die. I don't want to quench. But have you noticed that no matter how long anyone might have been said to have lived in the Bible, at least everyone here will read their Bible. We all know of Lamech. We know of Methuselah. They all died. Nobody is getting out alive. However, it is easy to achieve immortality in a nation of liars. I'll show you. If you told the truth today, and somebody came around and said, because of the truth you have told, they are going to kill you, So they took the man away. They probably hung him or quarter him or whatever they might have done to him. The one thing you cannot do is kill the truth he has told. You cannot kill that truth. The truth continues to live long after the teller might have died. I can't count the number of you here who might have said at one point or the other, Fela Anikulapo was a prophet. He wasn't a prophet. Liar. Fela was a truth teller. That's all he was. He merely said the truth. You might not have liked the way he said it. He probably had a stick of weed in one hand when he was saying it. And you, brother Spirit, Auntie Christy, speak your own truth in your own way. It is only in that moment that you fulfill the will of God and you bring other people to salvation. They might have been waiting only for you to say your own piece. It might be that somebody somewhere is waiting on you to say your own piece before they might be able to pick up their own gauntlet. When Pastor was preaching earlier on, there was something he said that I think it is important that we should take a look at. I realized that, I told you, I love the sound of my own voice. And what did they do? They made sure that they warned me. I'm seeing warnings there that I have already. So don't worry, I'm bringing it home. And what Daddy said was that when people bring an idea and they say, okay, this thing, this is the truth, and this is my belief, and you come, and you say, this thing, it could have been done perhaps differently. That different way that it could have been done, have you articulated it? Have you bring it to the table, put it on the table, let's talk about it. If the other person says no, it doesn't make it invalid. What it does is that it increases the body of ideas by which you find resolutions to your issues. I have been asked to speak under the auspices of the custodians of national conscience today. The custodian of national conscience, ably put together by Pastor Sam, is that we're asking ourselves, this situation in which we found ourselves, how do we come out of it? And I have found that the only way we can come out of where we are today is by latching on to truthful ideas, so that this tale of two nations, the one that has brought us to this point, which is propelled by the force of feudalism, what are we bringing forward by which to confront it? You can only confront an idea with another idea that is superior to the one you are seeking to contain. It is not sufficient to say, I don't want, I no agree. No. I no agree is not an option for leadership. It's not good. It's not an alternative governing policy. If we have said that feudalism is bad and feudalism is what is ruling us, what is good? And this is the alternative vision that I seek to bring to the table this morning, and I'll wrap up with that. In this country today, we are told we have 250 ethnic nationalities. Have you ever heard of Joseph's coat of many colors? That is what we are. Diversities. But in the midst of that diversity, the only way you can maximize the strength of the diversity by creating synergies, which means that people are talking to each other, they are bringing ideas from different corners, they are bringing different skill sets. But when you are bringing these different skill sets, to what purpose? Where are you going with them? If you are not aligning this to a strategy, what you are doing is that you are reacting. Reactions do not birth nations. Reactions only sustain injustices, because every time you react against an injustice, the system will put down your reaction, but in putting down that reaction, it also asserts its own capacity to impose its will. So let's move beyond reactions. I don't want anything for myself that I do not want for my neighbor. The Nigerian is forced to engage Nigeria as a tribesman. You are either an Igbo, a Yoruba, an Ijo, a Kalabari, a Fulani, and you are either something of that or the other. Nobody ever treats you as a Nigerian and a human being. The only reason that has not happened is because of the need to preserve the capacity to apply unfair advantages. So you can't have an identikit of a Nigerian. So those of us who believe that this country can be better, first thing first, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say love your neighbor more than yourself. Let's be clear. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now that you've learned to love your neighbor as yourself, how do you come out of this mess? Because we are still in a mess. And I was talking to an idea that I said is what is required to confront the idea that we are struggling with. So what is this idea? That idea is of an egalitarian Nigeria. One that has sufficient room for each and every one of those who live within its borders. Your religiosity, your ethnicity should not matter. The class you come from should not matter. It is only when we find these commonalities that it becomes easy to isolate those who have oppressed all of us. There is only so much that can be said in one day, and only so much can be fitted into 30 minutes that I have already taken liberties by giving myself some more time. But no matter how long I stand here to talk to you, whatever I say is useless if there is no love in your heart to hear me. But when you're done embracing the love in your heart, you must also embrace one other reality. And that is the reality that tells you that however long you live, I've said it already, you will go one day. But when you're gone, what will be said that you did whilst you were here? Nigeria is laboring, is in the labor room, all right. Just as one Nigeria died in 1966, there is another Nigeria that must die. It's not that it will die, it must die. Because if that Nigeria does not die, what is being designed for my children and your children and our children's children is scary. Ideas rule the world. The Taliban waited 20 years on the strength of their ideas. America, with all of its might, got tired and left. There are Talibans in your government. They are waiting, and the only thing that will stop them are superior ideas. The only idea that I have to share with you is the one that says, love your neighbor as yourselves, but insist. Hear me again? Insist that you are not less than any other man, because the entire idea of Western civilization was created on one basic biblical precept, the equality of all men. The creation and erection of feudal states is also found on one principle, the inequality, acceptable non-equality of all men. So, that second nation that needs to be battered because this one is going to die is the one that understands that all men are equal. Thank you very much.